the information superhighway, an online network called Internet.
Now it's all turned upside down. I wish I could figure out. Do you think it's just a phase I'm going through? It's just a phase. Not yet.
They should have had more. Oh, that's a lot more subtle than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I remember it being more than that. All right, loud bumpy noises.
All
Ow.
right,
Hey, everyone.
Welcome to
Big Wolf on Campus. Ow.
Yeah, it's worse when you plug it into mine.
Yeah.
So I have to like jackhammer it in there. Welcome to the Breath of My Timeline.
Mm-hmm. Is that what you titled it?
Yeah.
Nice.
This is the small boy part. Are you timing?
Am I timing? Oh,
I
how
don't
long
wanna
do you want it to
time.
be?
No, sorry, I got music
You don't
up.
have a timer. It's
No, I
built
don't
in.
want to.
Oh, okay.
I'll
20 minutes?
Yeah, sure. I'm just gonna play Starbound music in the background for this one, because it's better than Breath of the Wild's music. So if you're coming from none of these Zelda episodes, for the last 2 episodes we've been talking about Zelda because I just got off of Breath of the Wild and I needed to talk about it so I could get it out of my mind. Last episode we talked about the timeline, and I wanted to place Breath of the Wild in that timeline somewhere. So that's what we're gonna do now. Quick blanket spoiler warning for every Zelda game.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much as the last one because mostly I'm just gonna be spoiling Breath of the Wild. So I can see it.
Okay. I'm just positioning the timer in a way that makes it so you
just,
can
like,
have an
turn the
ease of
timer
access to it.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna get right
Why
into
did we need
it
a
here.
timer? You can see how long we've been recording for.
Yeah, but I started a little bit before we started.
All right.
So plus it's like dark. So there's like 5 popular theories currently as to where Breath of the Wild fits in because it's very vague as to where it might be. So the first 3 are the most clear, is that it's at the very far future of the downfall timeline, the child timeline, or the adult timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. There's evidence for it in the games, but there's not a lot of evidence for any of them, which is why people are very confused. Because the only solid evidence we have, the only solid like time story things that we have for Breath of the Wild so far is that 10,000 years ago there was a this like shit. I've already forgotten Breath of the Wild story. No, there was this Calamity Ganon boy who was.
Do you think the term calamity came from him, or do you think?
No, this one is very clearly far in the future in the games.
Okay.
There is like
so
kind
they
of
already had a word for calamity.
Yeah. There is kind of a 6th theory that's like it's before Skyward Sword, but that doesn't make any fucking sense. So we're gonna disregard that one.
Oh, but what if it's all cyclical?
That is actually another theory.
Oh, nice.
Which I don't really like. But,
I love when things are cyclical.
Sure, I just don't think it works for Zelda.
Fair enough.
So there's this 10,000 years ago there was another resurrection of Ganon in the form of like Calamity Ganon. They were able to, the Sheikah tribe, who were like very prosperous at this point, they weren't like a died out tribe that nobody really knew about. And in Breath of the Wild, it's the first time that we've like fully seen the Sheikah tribe and what they could do. Mm-hmm. Even that's still not a lot, but they built these robot boys called the Divine Beasts, who were designed, and the Guardians and a bunch of other things that were designed to basically fight and kill, seal away Ganon. And they successfully did that. The Divine Beasts and their champions were able to do that. So all of those were kind of just shut down and put away. Hyrule was prosperous for 10,000 years until 100 years before Breath of the Wild starts, where it's kind of prophesized that and things rumbling start happening where Calamity Ganon might return. And so it's decided by the King of Hyrule and his daughter Zelda that they will make a plan to find people to pilot the divine beasts and reactivate somehow with the help of the Sheikah and retrain the Guardians so that they can be ready when or if and when Calamity Ganon comes back. So they do that, and they choose their champions, one from each tribe. They have Zelda. Zelda is just kind of the leader of all this. She's trying to activate her sealing power so that when Calamity Ganon comes back, they can seal her away because she's like the descendant of the goddess Hylia, and she has that power and stuff. But she was never fully taught it because when she was 6, her mom died, and she was supposed to teach her how to use it. So she's going to these springs and going all over the world trying to find it, and she can't really figure it out. But she's given this protector, Link, who she kind of disdains for a while because she's like, I can't protect myself. Link is just like a showing of my failure of how I can't activate my powers to protect myself. But she learns to love him, blah, blah, blah.
Aw, and they sex.
It's super implied in this game that they do.
Oh, really?
It's Skyward Sword is the
cutscene.
No. Skyward Sword is the most so, where it's like they're basically in a relationship, but also in Breath of the Wild, it's pretty clear. Yeah. The Starbound music is swelling. So you got your 4 champions from each tribe that were taught to control the divine beasts. You have Daruk of the Gorons, you have Revali, who's a dick, of the Rito, you have Urbosa of the Gerudo, and Mifa of the Zora. And they all pilot their divine beasts, but Calamity Ganon was what came out earlier than everybody expected, so they all rushed to their divine beasts. Zelda tried to activate her sealing power, but kind of didn't do it quick enough. So there was a point where Ganon was able to, pretty much right after he came back, he took over all the Guardians, and the Guardians fucked everybody up, and he also controlled the divine beasts, and then Ganon, forms of Ganon inside the divine beast killed all the champions, and then Zelda and Link ran around until Link almost got killed by a Guardian. Zelda was like, no! And in one final moment was able to activate her sealing power and deactivate the Guardian. But Link was hit and passed out. But the Master Sword that he had was still reacting and responding to him. So Zelda was like, oh shit, we have technology for this. Take him to the Shrine of Resurrection. So Zelda just ordered 2 Sheikah men to take him to the Shrine of Resurrection and put him there until Hyrule was at a point where he could probably come back and save everything, which is the 100 years that go by when you wake up and Breath of the Wild starts.
Yeah.
So throughout Breath of the Wild, and then Zelda faces up the courage now that she has the sealing power. She goes to Hyrule Castle and just kind of walks up and is like, come at me, bitch. And then seals Ganon away, kind of. But her power is waning, and that's when she's like, okay, I need to wake up Link so he can come save me.
That's interesting. It's almost as if, imagine Ocarina of Time, but the game starts when you're 17, and there's a whole bunch of implications. That was actually there was a lot of points in Breath of the Wild where they would show cutscenes of 100 years ago, and I was just like, I want to play that game. Yeah,
I don't want to play this one. I want to play the 100 years ago Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
But
DLC,
right? I would love that. There is actually DLC coming, and we don't know what it is. So
that'd be cool.
Yeah, so Link goes around. He has to reactivate the divine beasts and free the spirits of the champions so that he can infiltrate Hyrule Castle and save Zelda and kill Ganon once and for all. And then it's revealed at the end of the game that Calamity Ganon is, and this is the main evidence for why it has to take place at the end of one of the 3 timelines, is that Calamity Ganon is a resurrection of Ganon that decided that he didn't want to take a human form, because he's been taking a human form and that's been a detriment to him so far. So he is just the complete hatred and embodiment that Demise was in Skyward Sword. He's just that being, and that's why he looks like he does in Breath of the Wild and isn't really a personable talking human boy. So he's just terrible and human and whatever, or not human or whatever. And so Zelda and Link are finally able to defeat Ganon and they kill him. They don't really even, well, they kind of, it's implied that, it's not really implied anything. Zelda just kind of turns him into a small little ball and then it blips out of existence. So we don't know if she sealed him or if they killed him.
It's like what happened with Yellow Jacket and Ant-Man.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so basically the three, there's evidence for in the game for them, for the game, for Breath of the Wild taking place either 10,000 years after, at some point 10,000 years after Child Era, Adult Timeline, or Downfall Timeline. Downfall Timeline one is pretty flimsy. The only evidence is like where the Master Sword is. It's in the same place in A Link to the Past as it is in Breath of the Wild, which isn't even evidence, because the only reason the Master Sword is in the Lost Woods in Breath of the Wild is because that's where Zelda put it after they put Link back in the Shrine of Resurrection.
Okay.
But we don't know where Link got it from 100 years ago. That's never explained. So he could have got it from fucking anywhere. He could have got it from the Temple of Time or Hyrule Castle or something.
Like bought it on Amazon.
Sure. But that's pretty much the only evidence for that one. We're not going to talk about that one that much because I don't like it. But,
bias.
Yep.
Yep.
But there's also the Adult Timeline, which is the one with Wind Waker and stuff, which the evidence for that is that like eons have gone past where the Great Sea has receded and people are starting to flourish again in this world. And there's one really flimsy piece of evidence for that, and then there's two pieces of huge fucking evidence for that.
Okay.
And the one piece of flimsy evidence is there's an item in the game called rock salt, which you use as a supplement for cooking.
Yeah.
Which it's just salt.
Sure.
But the item description of it says that it is rocks left over from the ancient sea. It's the one and only reference of any ancient sea or great ancient sea in the game that's very factual, rooted in description and stuff.
Right.
And that's where people are like, oh, the ancient sea is not, there's no flood in any other timeline except for the Child Timeline with Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks. So this must be in the Adult Timeline. And that makes sense. That's very flimsy just because it's based on one item description. But then there's also two factors of huge evidence, which is the Rudo tribe, or the Rito people and the Korok people, which are both races and species that only ever appeared in Wind Waker. Never appeared in any other game, and to this day have never appeared in any other game.
Okay.
And also, fun side note, I mentioned on, I think, the first series of these Zelda ones that the Kokiri haven't appeared in any other game.
Yes.
They have appeared in one other game, but as spirits, and that's in the Wind Waker, where it is heavily implied, pretty much confirmed, but maybe not anymore because of Breath of the Wild, that the Kokiri they evolved into Koroks when the Great Flood happened, so that they could, like, adapt. And it's also, and that one probably is still sound, but in... Also in Wind Waker, the Rito people, it's in the same way that the Kokiri became the Koroks. It's heavily implied that the Rito became the Zora became the Rito to adapt, because everything, which doesn't really make much sense, because if fish people were in a world that's just full of water, wouldn't they want to stay fish people?
Well, you know,
so didn't make much sense.
If they feel like they were born in the wrong body,
I guess that's fine. But so that's like big evidence for that. And there's also Zoras in Breath of the Wild, which is evidence against the adult thing because there's no Zoras in Wind Waker. So one of the like evidence for helping that is maybe they just shared a common ancestor and they were somewhere else in Wind Waker that we couldn't see them.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to show every single being that exists in every single.
And
Zelda
there's
game.
also people who are saying that it just doesn't exist in any timeline, which is another one of the theories. But
Breath of the Wild kind of stands on its own.
It's kind of like a reboot type thing that's just borrowing from other games and making fun references.
All right.
But I don't like that because it's all connected.
Hashtag it's all connected.
Yep. But yeah, so that's the Wind Waker thing. Also, there are also people who are theorizing that the Gerudo Desert is because it has like fruit everywhere, and there's like the big skeleton. There's a big skeleton in a lot of the areas of the Breath of the Wild, and the big skeleton in the Gerudo area is a whale. So people are thinking that the biggest area of the Great Sea is the Gerudo Desert, if you're subscribing to that theory. But so that's kind of that one. Then the one that I personally subscribe to is that it's at the end of the child timeline. And I'm pretty sure this is what's intended because of a lot of things that the developers have said and very hard evidence in the game.
All right. Lay it on me. You have 6 minutes.
The child timeline, it being at the end of the child timeline, is very heavily supported by one line that Zelda says in a cutscene where she is knighting Link to become her official like guardian person.
Boyfriend.
Sure. And the what she says in the line that you will become the hero that wields the Master Sword. This has been a legend that is passed down through time, whether it be a sword held skyward, a traveler through time, or someone basked in twilight. That line is what cements it in the child timeline.
Yeah, that's
because if Skyward
and
Ocarina happened before everything, but Twilight Princess only happens in the child timeline, no matter what. So, well, no matter what is arguable, but which we'll get to.
I mean, maybe they just are really big fans of Stephanie Meyer books.
Sure, but and some people are using the argument that like that's just a fun reference that they're saying, so it could still be in the adult timeline, or maybe something like Twilight Princess did happen.
Do you think the idea was them to make enough references that it could go any direction?
Probably, and that's it's and there's like another theory where that there's just these like again with the myth thing where there's just people are just getting things wrong, or like some kind of like parallel worlds thing where it's been so long that maybe people are starting to remember the other timeline.
Yeah.
So they're getting like vague rememberings of it because there's a lot of like places in the game that are named after characters, but they're like slightly misspelled names of that character. Like there's a Tingle Island, but Tingle is spelled with EL instead of LE.
Oh, interesting.
And there's all these like different types of things. But there's also this isn't evidence for this is just to like discount anyone who thinks it takes place before Skyward Sword or before Ocarina. There's also reference of the sages in the game. There's reference of Rudo being the sage of the Zoras, and that's why all of the divine beasts are named after the sages of their respective tribes. So there's Naboris named after Naburu, or Naboru, however you say that. Rudo is named after, or Ruta is named after Ruto. Meadow is named after Medley from Wind Waker. And what's the Gerudo one? It's like Daruda or something. Daru something, who's named after Darunia. So yeah, that's all stuff. It's very clearly after Ocarina of Time, but where it falls in the timelines is vague. But then there's the last theory, which there's also a lot more evidence for the. I want to talk about the child one a little bit more because there's a lot of evidence for it. It's fun. And there's the main thing that people point to for like actual evidence from creators is that Eiji Aonuma said a little bit before Breath of the Wild, before it was even called Breath of the Wild, he said that he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, we've been working on this new Zelda game, and I feel like Twilight Princess, a lot of the things that I did in Twilight Princess were setting up things that I want to do now in this new Zelda game. So what does he mean by that? Does he mean like mechanic-wise, which doesn't really make any sense because it's completely different than any of that?
Sure.
Or is he talking about story things with...
But story could also just mean like the way the story works and the way the story functions, not necessarily
definitely
the story itself. Yeah.
But I mean, it kind of makes sense in the child timeline thing because Ganon has like come back a couple times in the child timeline, and only a couple times. And they mention in Breath of the Wild that he's only come back a couple times before this, and only once before as Calamity Ganon. But anyway, the last and final theory, which is kind of weird to me, but is fun and would explain a reboot, but just doesn't make any sense. They would have to do a lot of explaining, like time-space explaining, to have this make sense. Maybe it's in the DLC, who knows? But It's the theory that Breath of the Wild is, since it's so far set in the future, at some point space-time realized that there were so many timelines happening that it slowly converged them.
I love that.
And created a unified timeline that starts with Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
So that's why there's so many references to all of the
them.
games. That's why the Rito and the Zoras coexist at the same time. That's why the Koroks, who only existed because of Wind Waker, exist.
Yeah, dude. Secret Wars.
That's why, yeah, pretty much. That's why the Great Sea is a thing. That's why also like the Hero of Time winning and failing. That's why the sages did come back and also didn't come back at the same time. That's why Ganon is like a thing that's around. But that's the one that makes the most that is the most convenient, but doesn't make a lot of sense because like why would that happen?
Yeah.
But like they would have to explain a lot of stuff or just be like, yeah, that's what happened. It's Zelda. Don't worry about it. We're rebooting, starting a new timeline.
Yeah, it almost feels like it's like a pick and choose your continuity sort of thing, where it's like, yeah, we split off into 3 different timelines, and Breath of the Wild could pick up from any one of those timelines if you wanted it to. We're not gonna force one timeline on you. We're gonna say, here's all of them, and now it starts from here no matter what you believe.
So I know we have 12 seconds left on your timer, but I'm just going to go over a little bit just to talk about my personal theory, which it's not like I didn't come up with this, but well, I kind of did.
All right. Give me extra time. How long are we talking?
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
I came up with a unified timeline theory and the one I'm about to talk about by myself, but then later found out that a lot of people had that idea.
Sure. No one's original.
No, exactly. But the one that if the child timeline didn't make so much sense, I would subscribe to this one, which is basically, I think it would be really cool if, and this is kind of touching on the like Zelda being like a Legend of Zelda being like a myth thing that's just mistold over and over again, is that Breath of the Wild is an inevitable happenstance in anything that's going to happen with Zelda forever, always. So where Skyward Sword is the first one, Breath of the Wild is the last one.
Oh, and that's why it's so far in the future.
Yeah, that's why it's so far in the future, and that's why and I think that's why like Ganon made his last ditch effort to expel like just be hate and be the thing that he wants Hyrule to be, but then Zelda is finally able to seal him. So if you seal that, the essence of Ganon, you're done. So at the end of Breath of the Wild, they just kind of like go off and they're like, we're gonna make Hyrule better again. We're gonna restore Hyrule to what it once was and maybe greater. And I think that's like a nice note to be like, you're done. Ganon's gone for good. Blah blah blah.
You know what's fascinating about that idea is that I'm sure this is not the only comic book to do it, and I know we don't talk about comic books on the show, but there was a free comic book day comic maybe 2 years ago or so about Adventure Time, and I don't care about Adventure Time, but I picked it up because it was free.
Sure. I remember that.
Yeah, and it was basically, it had 3 different timelines in it, and it started one way, and by the last, it like completely diverged, and it, like, you know, you had to read it in certain orders and everything like that. But by the last page, every story converged into one point. So it's like, it's almost like this sense of inevitability where even if it starts one way, it could go 1,000 different directions, but the ending and the beginning are always the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just to end this little mini episode, the unified timeline is also pretty fun because if you look at it in a timeline sense, it looks like a rupee.
Oh yeah,
because it goes like this and then splits off into 3 parts. And
you know what they say, guys?
Together.
Time is money. And with that,
incredible.
Are we done with our Zelda stuff?
I think we can lay the Legend of Zelda online podcast edition to rest.
We have done it. This was a very different thing than what we normally do here. This was a saga.
So I feel like this isn't always going to happen. More so, it's probably going to be when I play a new game that sucks me in. We'll talk about it a little bit, not for 3 episodes of this podcast.
Yeah.
But I've decided that this podcast is my gaming outlet. So, but
fair enough.
Don't worry. I don't play a lot of games, so it won't happen as often as it just did.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say if it happens so often that we maybe have to do a spin-off show of some capacity.
This just becomes Zelda Cast.
The Zelda Cast. No, but I mean, yeah, if this is something, if you enjoyed this, please let us know.
Sure.
This podcast is still in the early stages of its development. If you're like, I hated this and I want you guys to ramble about random stuff.
I did want to ask this. This will be our tweet thing.
Okay.
Do you like the background music? Or do you just want us to not
Yeah,
have
maybe you want to
anything?
play your own background music while you listen. Or maybe you just find it distracting overall. I don't know. Or
Sure. Let us
perhaps
know.
you love it. Perhaps it's your favorite thing.
Because I know there's like because in the producer Ricky episode we did, we had someone else just like funnily doing music for us, but with these past Zelda ones, I've just treated it as like a backing track to help out.
Yes.
So just because we can, but if you don't like it, we can stop doing it. Mm-hmm. It's up to you, the listeners.
But it's always an option because we set it up that way to play music and whatever.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, I mean, let us know. Let us know all of these things over on Twitter at an online podcast. I hate it when you do that. It's like a speech jammer. I can't get my words out. At an online podcast.
That's the one.
On Twitter. Let us know about the music. Let us know if you like episodes where we, break down.
Do you like more
nerdy stuff?
Yeah, or even just going into them with a topic? Because this is like the third or fourth one that we've actually prepared a topic for. Well, I did.
Yeah.
You didn't.
No, I haven't prepared anything.
Or do you
I've
just
been
like
sitting here.
more so the ones where I open the podcast each time with "How you doing, Scott?"
Yeah. I like the idea of just explainer episodes where it's just one because the conversation stuff, it's like a more back and forth sort of thing, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
But then there is I like the idea of coming like one person having a lot to say and then it's like new to the other person.
Yeah.
So join us next week when I break down all of Big Wolf on Campus.
Oh, God.
Season by season.
How many seasons are there?
I don't know, probably like 3. I
jeez.
can't remember it. All I remember is they pulled a Return of the Jedi move where one of the seasons one of the sidekick characters came back like blind and there was like hilarity ensued. So it was a good time. There's also an episode where he had a stopwatch that could reverse time and he ate a pizza like 3 times. And I wish I could. That's the reason I wanted to have that power.
Incredible.
Anyway, yeah, it's more. Do you think Big Wolf on Campus is just about werewolves? You're wrong.
You're wrong. I'm sorry, Scott. Jeez.
I don't remember any of that show.
You are rocking this table like a madman right now.
I just did this, and
God,
it's just
it's going crazy. This table is upside down now.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
And we're naked.
Oh no!
Oh God!
For any of our viewers who have access to internet, we invite your comments.